know you want me to. I know you want me to. Oh, ooh, ooh. Ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da.
In. Press this one.
Magandang umaga, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, magandang gabi kung saan man kayo naroon. Tony Lagman and friends. Kasama natin si Ed Lagman.
Magandang gabi.
In.
Pasa natin kay Freddy Izon.
Magandang tanghali po dyan sa mga Grab drivers natin sa Maynila at sa mga ibang lugar pa dyan. At dito sa Amerika, good evening. Sa ibang lugar, good morning. Ako po si Freddy Ison lang po. Kasama po natin dito si Tony and Ed Lagman. Pati na rin po si Kuya Wesley Templo at ang ating guest. Good evening po, Doc.
Hi.
Good evening po sa inyong lahat.
Okay, Wesley, bati.
Sa lahat ng ating listeners, magandang umaga, magandang tanghali at magandang gabi. Samahan niyo po kami sa aming istasyon at maaring marami kayong mapulot sa amin. Mag-message lang po kayo kung anong comments or kung anong gusto nyong itanong kay Doc. Andito lang po kami. Samahan niyo po kami. Salamat po.
Okay, maraming salamat. At I would like to give a short introduction sa ating guest speaker. Guest natin si Dr. Jessy Ang. He is a board-certified psychiatrist with a private practice since 1982. Dr. Ang obtained his medical degree from the University of Santo Tomas with high honors. He completed his residency at the University of Washington, where he became an instructor. He was chairman Department of Psychiatry at St. Joseph's Hospital in Tacoma. Magandang gabi, Dr. Jessy Ang. Welcome to the program.
Magandang gabi sa inyo lahat.
Magandang gabi.
Evening.
Ayan.
Evening po.
Good evening, Doc.
Hi.
Okay, so our topic tonight, kasi si Dr. Jessy Ang, may ano siya, no? Meron siyang advocate na gusto niyang talagang gawin sa Pilipinas, no? Doon sa ating isang malaking problema na hanggang ngayon, ano? Medyo is bothering a lot of parents and mga children who are victims of this drug abuse. Dr. Jessy Ang, alam ko ang pinaka-popular na drug abuse ng mga kabataan, o siguro hindi man kabataan, pati medyo may mga edad na, yung Shabu. Can you give us a brief history kung paano ba lumitaw yung Shabu na yon?
Ang nagsimula yan, mula nung 1887, na-develop ang amphetamine sa Germany. Ang pangalan noon ay Pervitin, P-E-R-V-I-T-I-N. And it was used during World War I so that the German soldiers would remain alert and awake during battles at nighttime. Then there was a Japanese chemist who was able to extract from a plant known as ephedra, known as ephedrine, and this ephedrine spelled as E-P-H-E-D-R-I-N-E, was then converted in what we call methamphetamine, or if it becomes crystallized, it's called crystal meth or Shabu. From then, ginamit yun ng mga kamikaze pilots, ng mga Japanese soldiers to remain awake during battles, also to make them high when they're gonna do a suicide mission. So they feel elated, they feel that they're doing this in the name of the emperor, and so it takes away their fear. When the war was over, there was a lot of crystal methamphetamine available in Japan. So they made it a law to ban this particular drug. However, it went to to the drug cartels in Mexico. The drug cartels in Mexico then decided to export it to United States through California. Ang ginawa ngayon ng mga US Congress, binan yung mga gamot na merong ephedrine, yung Sudafed, yung pseudoephedrine. Without the permission of a doctor, you cannot prescribe that medication. So nawala yung Sudafed sa over the counter. Ngayon magpit ngayon yung mga andun sa US border, ang ginawa ng mga drug cartel nilipat naman sa China. Now, the problem in China is that they have in their coastal areas, they have a plant, ang pangalan parang muwang. It's a plant that they use for bronchial asthma. It's also called ephedra, and then converted into ephedrine will be used to help with bronchial asthma. However, there are drug lords in China who then would use ephedrine along and then try to manufacture in laboratories using other chemicals, and then convert it to crystal meth. And then from then, China, the drug lords then send it to the Philippines and Burma. So now the 3 distribution centers are China, Burma, and the Philippines. So we are what we call hub tayo ng mga itong distribution of crystal meth.
Okay. Dr. Jessy Ang, I know that itong Shabu na po, a lot of yung mga drug abusers and those who would like to sell this drug, kung minsan they just manufacture it sa isang bahay o kaya sa isang warehouse. Is there a risk dahil sa ano-anong mga components ang nilalagay nila doon?
So ang main ingredient is ephedrine, pero inahalo nila yung mga kamukha ng mga battery acid, lithium, yung mga phosphoro, yung mga fertilizer. And so the problem with that one is that when you combine it, there's a possibility of because it's highly inflammable, that you could have what they call fire and explosions. Now, I want to let you know that Shabu is already an endemic drug problem. But what I meant by that is that it's been there for many years. Nakapagtataka nga, nung panahon ni FBR, ni Ramos, this is from I believe this is from PIDEA, that under Fidel Ramos, there were 6.4 million users. However, out of that 6.4 million users, 50% of them would only use it by weekly, once a week. And the 15% will only use once a month. So you wouldn't label as drug addiction. Now, when Arroyo arrived and their term, it was reduced to less than 2 million. And then when Aquino left his office in 2015, this is from the drug board, dangerous drug board, it was 1.8 million. However, when President Duterte took over, he claimed that there are 3.7 million addicts. So now the question is, where did he get these statistics? And so in other words, what I'm trying to let you know, it is already a drug that's been with us for many years, and it's not been really what I would call a crisis. In China, there are 40 million net users out of the 1 billion. In the United States, there are about 3% of the 350 million. So we're talking about 12 million US citizens who use crystal meth or meth. And yet, it's not considered a national crisis. The crisis that we have right now in America is fentanyl. And fentanyl is much more potent, more destructive, and more deadly. Like in the last year, there were 60,000 deaths from fentanyl, 60,000 deaths because of respiratory arrest. So what I'm trying to say here as a message is that I think we need to ask ourselves, this is not something that, is this something being demonized? When actually Shabu is a drug that's been with us for many years, and it's not really the issue. What I'm more worried about is the violence that is being used to make it as if it is a very serious issue that affects our national, our people.
Doc, what chemical compositions are found in these substances that people find so addicting?
Ang crystal meth is similar to amphetamines. Ang nakakaiba lang, meron isang atom doon, CH3. But it has the same usage. Ang amphetamine here in America is illegal under certain drugs. Uh, we call it what you call stimulants. You know, Adderall, Ritalin, and this Adderall is what they call dextroamphetamine, and it's used to help people who has problems with focus and concentration. Ang pangalan nun is ADHD. Yung mga taong hindi makapag lack of focus,
Yeah.
lack of concentration, at tapos nahirapan sa eskwela kasi lagi silang nagpa-procrastinate. They don't do their homework, they daydream a lot, they're very hyperactive, galaw siya ng kamay nila at paa. It's used for ADHD, yung legal drug na known as Adderall, wala sa atin yata noon. And it's used also there was a time that we use it for weight loss, yung dexedrine, ang pangalan dexedrine. And there is a drug that is not amphetamine, but is supposed to help people to stay awake. So, ang problema naman sa atin, kasi mahirap na bayan tayo, and they're very restrictive about allowing what you call legal drugs that can help with ADHD, as well as obesity. So people tend to use this drug for several purposes. Number one, the people who want to stay awake at night, yung mga jeepney drivers, yung mga bus drivers, yung mga naghahanap sa mga palengke sa gabi, so they have to stay awake. So the very cheap drug that they can use is crystal meth. O number two, yung mga taong gusto magbawas ang weight nila, it can be used. Number three, it can help them focus and concentrate, so they use crystal meth. Number four, kung ikaw na-stress, nalulungkot ka, that could take away your boredom and loneliness.
How about students who are maybe taking exams that they do some cramming and kailangan nilang gising para makapag-aral sila? Do they use it also, Dr. Jessy?
Yeah, there is some incidents that people will use it just for the time before the exam. Ang tawag din mga low-level users, yung they only use it as needed basis. Kumukha nung they are about to take an exam, they want something that will make them stay awake at night. They will want something that will make them able to really have more focus. Because ang ginagawa ng gamot na ito, through the dopamine system, it increases energy, increases their attention, increases their focus.
Mm-hmm.
What about those people who are addicted to this primarily because they get some sort of satisfaction or pleasure?
Ang finding, go ahead. Go ahead.
That's the question. Yeah.
Okay. Ang research, ang nalalaman nila na doon sa ating mga pleasurable activities, we find pleasure in eating, and the one that gives us a sense of pleasure and tawag doon reward sensation, ang neurotransmitter sa brain is called dopamine. So ang ating brain is about 10 pounds. Ang brain natin has about 8 billion neurons. Now, the neurons communicate to each other. Ang tawag doon ay neurotransmitter. So how they communicate is through what we call a neurotransmitter. And there are several neurotransmitters. You have the serotonin, you have the norepinephrine, and you have the dopamine. The dopamine is the neurotransmitter that gives you a sense of a pleasurable sensation when you do certain activities. For example, pagkain. Kung gusto niyo pagkain, madalas kayong kakain ng paring pagkain kasi it gives you a sense of pleasure. Ang nabibigay sa inyo ng sense of pleasure is being mediated by dopamine. Or when you have what they call sex, when you have sexual activities, so there is a heightened sense of ecstasy or awareness after having a sex during the sexual relation. O kaya kung meron kayong problema now, itong ang levels ng dopamine sa food intake or sex, pag kinumpare mo yan sa meth, ang lumalabas yan na ang meth, it will give you maybe more than 100 times than the pleasure you derive from eating or even from sex. Kaya nakakalungkot yan kasi some people will use meth, and what will happen is they become so aggressive in sex because they find a heightened sense of pleasure or awareness or euphoria that they become they have what they call protracted, aggressive sex to the point it causes violence toward women. Kaya yun ang nangyayari noon. Tapos, that's how the pleasurable sensation is derived from using the neurotransmitter known as dopamine. And this particular meth is more potent than cocaine. It's about 100 times potent than cocaine in terms of giving you the pleasurable sensation.
Wow.
See.
No wonder.
No wonder bakit maraming gumagamit niya.
Siguro dapat hindi niyo sinabi yun.
You know what? I was trying to forewarn you that it can lead to heightened pleasure, but on the other hand, you're not able to be aware about the consequences. That people tend to be aggressive when they use it. They tend to be what we call there is a heightened sense of pleasure that they become very, very. They could assault people in trying to derive that pleasure. So that's a problem with that drug.
So kaya pala Doc, Kaya pala Doc sa Pilipinas, marami tayong nandidinig na krimen na ni-rape, pinapatay pa. Tapos sa mga nire-rape, pinapatay nila mga 14 below years old, no? At ang mga perpetrators, mga bata pa rin ho. At tapos siguro, yun nagagawa ba ho ng isang, kunyari, yung normal na tao na siguro na natukso lang or meron pa hong mas grabe yun, gumagamit po ng ganyang illicit drug?
Oh, I see. I don't think that you could become a criminal or become what you call it may lead to what you call illegal activities such as rape or assault just by intermittent use. Hindi mangyayari yon. Usually, it could happen when it reaches the point wherein you become addicted to the drugs and the drug doesn't seem to work anymore and destroys some brain cells that wherein it gives you, kasi lalanin nyo, ang brain, maraming parts yan. Ang one of the part of the brain sa harap nyo is called frontal lobe. Okay? Prefrontal lobe. Yung prefrontal lobe is the one that helps you make good decisions. It's the one that makes you good judgment. It's the one that makes you have appropriate social norms. In other words, normal conversation, polite, respectful. Ngayon, problema sa Shabu, pag nagamit mo yung madalas, masisira ang mga brain cells ng prefrontal lobe at saka yun sa ilalim nito, ang tawag na limbic system. So mangyayari, pag nadami sa limbic system, you will have symptoms such as anxiety, anger outbursts, irritability, depression. So a lot of things can happen. Now, the myth about this drug is that they're claiming that people who use meth will become rapists or will kill people. Ang nakakapagtataka niyan, there are very, very few. Because the people who commit crimes, rape and sexual assault, they already have a pre-existing sociopathic or antisocial disorders. Ang ibig ko sabihin, pinag-aralan yan. Ang question was, do people who use meth becomes potentially criminals? Ang lumalabas, based upon studies sa mga institutions sa California, that the ones who are more prone to commit crimes from the beginning have already committed crimes before they use the drug, or they have this tendency to be antisocial or sociopathic. An example, China. In China, this is mainland China. So there were 40 million users of Shabu. Okay. Now after the 40 million, there were 70,000 crimes committed. 70,000 crimes committed, and more than 80% were mainly robbery and theft. There were only 300 cases pertaining to murder and rape from Shabu. So 300 cases out of 40 million users, makikita mo napakaliit yan. Out of 70,000 cases, 300 cases lang is crime against persons, but more so about robbery and theft. Kaya sa Pilipinas, marami pa tayong rape and assault and theft and not necessarily got to do with crystal meth. So the link claiming that most rapes and most sexual assault, most physical assaults are due to meth use is a myth. In other words, hindi totoo yun. Meron ng crime from using meth, but doesn't mean to say that most people who committed sexual assault is due to meth. They are done because, number one, because the person probably has poor character. I mean, meron silang character flaws, or number 2, wala silang konsyensya, o tawag natin antisocial o sociopathic.
Mukhang dyan sa Pilipinas, Doc, ganun ang nangyayari. Like, let's say, heinous crimes being committed, they always attribute that to being related to drugs or drug abuse.
Ang nangyari niyan, Ed, is that we were, and I was trying to be very, very tactful when I was there because I wanted to convince the government to take away this drug war, because I think, first and foremost, it is illegal and it's immoral. Because when you kill someone just because they happen to be a drug user or a drug taker or a drug pusher, you deprive them of the process of law, the due process of law. Everyone has the right to be tried, convict, number 1. Number 2, yung kanilang Operation Tokang is not gonna work because nire-raid nila mga bahay. Of course, yung mga tao mayroon ng problema sa Shabu, some of them have used the drugs so much that they become paranoid, they become suspicious. So pag nakita lang police, they will be so scared, and then they will become aggressive. And number 3, yung mga drug users, because they have a drug addiction, how could you be able to reasonably tell them to stop using drugs? Of course, they're going to use more drugs because they already been addicted. So they will go and buy some drugs. Ang gagawin ng mga ibang pulis natin, nakakaroon kunyari ng mga buy bus. Sila kunyari bibili ng gamot, tapos ng droga, tapos magpakita itong mga drug addict nito, kawawa naman sila. They have no chance because they are going to be arrested, or we see cases wherein they just got killed, claiming that they fought against the police. Pero kaya naman ako, I'm very frank right now to tell you, because this particular issue was not really a real issue. It was demonized, and we were made to believe, we were brainwashed. We were brainwashed to believe that this is a national problem. Why is that the case? And let's just prove the facts. First, ang human rights claim that there were 27,000 namatay since President Duterte took office. Yun namang mismong PNP said there are 4,000 police, 4,000 civilians were killed. The question is, how is it that those 4,000, just only from the PNP, why is it still unsolved crimes? Unsolved crimes pa ito. Number 2, which is more traumatic and more a serious problem? A man who is just making some, kunyari, ordinary laborer. We have stories of jeepney driver, stories about mga nag-alo lang sa palengke, and they are being raided in their house, and there is a gun shooting, and we have some victims like their children or grandchildren, and that's what happens.
So,
What I was trying to say is that because of that particular avenue, ano nangyayari sa ating bayan? We live in fear because who is the next target? So nangyayari niyan, the nation by itself is one sense covering in terms of we have developed what we call, nagkaroon na tayo ng parang, ang tawag doon ay desensitized, yung parang tayo na rin na we become what we call indifferent to this killing. It's parang nandun tayo na condition to accept this as part of normal because we believe that will stop the crime, that we will have peace and order. But I don't think so. When you lose people with guns and violence, which is more problematic, people who die from violence rather than people who use drugs which can be cured.
Doc, ganong kalaking damage dito sa utak ng isang tao ang paggamit nito? At let's say both parents are users, meron ba itong epekto sa mga anak nila, sa magiging anak nila?
Oh, I see. Yes. If a woman is using this drug extensively, in other words, hindi yung parang once in a while lang, okay? Mm-hmm. So kung nanay ay buntis at tapos gumagamit ng madalas ng droga, it could lead into what they call premature delivery. It could lead to low birth weight, and it could lead to yung placenta ma-disrupt, matatanggal sa bata. So that could be a problem. Ngayon, yung droga, pagka gumamit ka niyan, mangyayari niya masisira ang ngipin mo. Mawawala ka ng ngipin. Sira-sira ang ngipin mo kasi ang mangyayari dahil sa droga na yan, you have lost your saliva, magiging dry mouth. So number 1. Number 2, ang problema niyan, merong mga tao pag gumamit ng droga, they have this delusion or hallucination pala, tactile hallucination. Ibig sabihin nun, kamot sila ng kamot sa kanilang mga paa nila at kamay kasi akala nila meron silang parang hayop, parang mga bugs, insects. So kamot ng kamot, ngayon nakakaroon ngayon ng sugat. Sugat sa muka, sugat sa kamay. So you can see that these people who use drugs, they're 20 years old, and you see them later on, when they've used drugs, they look like they're 50 years old with a lot of abscess in their face or in their arms. They call it tactile hallucination.
Wow.
Kaya
Wala.
pala.
Itatanong naman ako kay Senator Bato.
Sige lang.
So,
Timely yata yung pagsali niya, no?
mamaya na, Senator Bato. May tanong muna ako.
Magagalit si Doc sa akin.
May tanong muna ako kay Doc. Doc, when you were in the Philippines, advocate kayo ng rehab, drug rehab sa Pilipinas. Nakausap niyo ho ba si Presidente regarding your advocate?
Actually, I presented ito nangyari. How I got involved with this? See, I'm not my specialty is not drug addiction. But how I get affected by this is that when I saw a younger crying sa bahay niya, ang tatay niya nandun sa puting kabaong.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a family who lost their father, crying in front of the funeral. They lost their father because he was killed, shot many times. And then I saw another picture of a woman crying in front of his husband, her husband, on the streets. And then when I saw people who were duct taped, hog-tied, I mean, this is really a tragedy. Sabi ko, you just think about this. George Floyd, pinatay sa Amerika dito sa Minnesota, isang tao lang yan. And there was a national outrage. And we lost a lot of people like that, ordinary people, poor people. Hindi mayayaman, kasi mayayaman, hindi na ng mga pulis. Pero ito mahirap, kawawa naman. Where was the outcry? Where was the outrage? Because I tell them, when I make my speeches over there, this could have been your father, this could have been your mother, this could have been your sister. Napayak ako doon, napayak. When I saw the child, I was so lungkot. Napayak talaga ako. Even ngayon, napapayak ako. Kasi nga, when I see those stories, when I see those people, I said, what happened to our people? We are supposed to be a Christian nation. We are supposed to be a compassionate nation. We're supposed to love one another, love our fellow man. And what did we do about this? We became silent. Were we silent because of fear? Or were we silent because we believe that that's the case to just make them expendable? So that was the one that really hit me hard. Ngayon, so when I went there, so I tried to present a plan to the president using, giving this idea to Secretary, I think it was name is, sino ba itong secretary dati? Unang secretary niya, DILG niya, Mike Sueno. And so I was proposing that one, why don't we have bago pa din nagkaroon itong task force, I said that why don't you create a task force and have a drug czar? Isama niyo ang Department of Education, DILG, tapos Department of Social Health Services, Department of Health. And I said, why don't you have what they call in every class education from grade 6 hanggang high school, they should have at least once a week classes on different drugs of abuse, from cocaine, meth, LSD, nicotine, alcohol, every week, every year, the mga ito. So that was one of my proposals. I proposed that number 2, i-abolish yung tokang. And instead, they should create what they call a special unit na they will go special rates. Ito lang itong special unit with weapons that are non-lethal. For example, they can use tasers. They should be taught how to shoot in the leg, not in the head or stomach. They should have a proper vest. That was one of my proposal. The other proposal I have was yung mga na-confiscate na mga drugs, para malaman ko talagang drugs yan, merong chemist na talagang i-examine bago sunugin. Kailangan sunugin kagad yan kasi ang nangyayari, na-recycle. Yun ang sinasabi nila, re-recycle yung drogong yan. So those were I had the suggestions. Number 4, yung sinasabi ng drug rehab. And that will have to be done maybe like an AA meeting or counseling. Pero ang nakakalungkot, may dalawang Chinese nagbigay ng 25 billion pesos, may 1,000 beds sa Fort Magsaysay, Fort Bonifacio, hindi nakagamit, wala kasing tao, walang pondo. Nandun, bakante. So how do we solve this problem?
So sa tingin nyo ho, Doc, yung advocacy nyo yan may continuation pa ho ba? Iko-continue pa ho ba nyo yan? Dahil sa tingin ko mukhang parang hindi pa ho nila na-i-implement yung nadinig nila sa inyo or hindi na ho natin alam kung paano ho nila.
Ang Fred, ang nakakalungkot and I have to just tell you the way I see it. It's more than an issue of the drug is the issue. And the issue, remember, if you like to look at how they treat drug addicts in Portugal, sa mga doon sa Europe, itataka kayo. Doon sa Portugal, meron doon para mga apartments and hindi sila kukulong. They're left to stay there. They have rules to follow and they were able to reduce drug addiction. So, tapos may mga ibang centers, pag may mga drug addiction, they give what they call kamakang heroin. They give what they call methadone treatment, Suboxone. Pero ang palagay ko, the drug problem is only a symptom of a greater problem. Unless you address the issue of poverty, kahirapan, unless you address the issue of education, pag wala kang edukasyon, di nakastambay ka lang. Pag wala kang pera, nakastambay ka lang. Ano mayayari pa nakastambay ka? Inuman, sabong, sugalan, tapos magchichismis kayo, tapos talk about women, you know, and so what we need is not, ako naniniwala sa Pilipinas na unless we have talagang libreng healthcare, hindi lang yung parang PhilHealth na babayaran ng konti lang ilang libo tapos then you have left to your own and then you file bankruptcy because sinalam mo yung bahay mo, yung lupa mo. What we need is a free healthcare like Medicare. Sa lahat, meron lang maliit na premium. Kasi pagka wala kang, kasi pag matandaan na tayo doon sa Pilipinas, pag 65, di ka napakakawa ng insurance. Mamatay matanda ron. So we need to have healthcare, we need to have education, and once you have somebody to have a sense of dignity through education and job opportunity, this particular drug use will be less because you have what they call a good sense of yourself. You have a goal, you have a purpose. Pag wala kang ginagawa, wala kang pera, wala kang trabaho, ano mangyayari sa iyo? You're gonna look for the things that give you the most joy with the cheapest one, which is drug.
Doc, ano yung response sa inyo when you met with the government officials?
Ang nangyari, ang puntahan ko lang doon, I met with the church groups, I met with layman groups. They welcomed me, yung mga city groups. I spoke to some of those kumaka doon sa Makati, tapos sa Pasay, and then I was able to meet some of the reformed drug addicts. And so they were very receptive to my idea. But ang problema nga lang, the conflict was, I'm trying to advocate a non-violent solution, and yet the main line is that these people are expendable. These people are violent criminals, so they have no use to society, and therefore they should be extinguished. And so when people are killed, you know, then it's like there is some kind of like parang opposite sa pinapropose ko. Meth use is a public health issue, not a criminal issue.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Jessy Ang, how can you help, or is there a treatment or rehabilitation program for those who are maybe deeply involved with drug abuse sa Shabu?
And in terms of, I even offered when Vice President Lenny Robredo was offered to be the chairman of the task force, I offered my services to the president as well as to the vice president as an advisor, pro bono. But then the Vice President Lenny Robredo was terminated after several weeks.
Yeah.
So it went back to the same issue. But how could I serve in that government if the policy of the government is that it's not a treatable issue rather than the people that are potential criminals and therefore they should be given harsh punishment in terms of no due process of law? How could I be able to work in that particular spirit? Now, as individual, what I can do is that I could probably do more education. If I were to go back to the Philippines, which I intend to go back, is to whoever welcomes me, I'll make this as a medical issue. I will say that this is a treatable issue. It's a public health issue. This is a Christian issue. We have to help one another. Ano ba sabi ng Diyos? I came here not for the healthy people. I came here for the sick. So our role is I came here for those who are the less. Di ba sabi sa even in most great countries that the true character of a nation is best measured of how it helps the dispossessed, the disabled, and the poor. So if we cannot do that, then we fail as a nation. If we cannot do that, we fail as a democratic nation. And so what I intend to go there is speak up. And I would not limit myself to just making it a health issue. I would speak up that we need to have a true democracy. Kasi talagang problema natin, from the beginning, we never had true democracy. Our people have either one, there was a lot of families who have owned the lands, and now there are no more families now who have political power. So the EDSA revolution was just to oust a dictator, but it never completed a revolution wherein they gave us true democracy where there is equality of opportunities. And we have economic slavery both within and without. Tingnan mo naman, sa Pilipinas, ang ating mga katulong, hindi nabibigyan ng tamang sweldo. Ang ating mga doon sa empleyado sa shopping malls, contractual. Doon naman sa mga bansa, we say that they're heroes, but we do not protect them. And they're being abused and misused by the employers. And they would have not gone back to the Middle East if there was jobs over there. Imagine that. Yung asawa mo nandun sa Middle East, ang tatay na iwan sa probinsya, kasama ng mga anak, what will happen? The kids will be neglected. And then there will be some sense of what they call infidelities. Kawawa naman. They never saw their mother for all those years. Babalik na lang pag matanda na sila. How could we accept that reality? And yet the Philippines, in the 1960s and 70s, we were progressive, better than Korea, better than Japan. And now Vietnam, who has been bombarded, who has suffered bombings, 1 million people killed, land destroyed by napalm bombs, by the U.S. bombs, for all these years. And yet Vietnam has turned out to be progressive now. If not equal to us, better than us. So we Filipinos are creative, and we still have hope. We should not lose hope. We should be able to really find ways to address this issue.
Okay, medyo basahin muna natin yung mga listeners, saka merong mga questions sila. Pagbigyan natin sila. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, may comment si Jessy Sarmiento. No? Sabi niya, good point, Doc. Drug addiction is a medical issue and not a criminal issue. Si Pablo de la Rosa Guevara Jr., I'm grateful for you having Dr. Jessy Ang. I hope that he continues his advocacy in helping our nation in handling the drug problem. Salamat po. Meron mong question dyan? Kung meron man, hindi yata lumilitaw sa akin.
Okay, si Andy Francisco has a question. Sabi niya, Dr. Jessy, tanong ko lang, yung bang CBD addicting?
CBD is the one that you're talking about, cannabis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yung sasabi yung cannabis. Yung cannabis, there are certain kind of ingredients. One I think is, I don't know which one is, if that is the one, there is a marijuana that is addictive, maybe that's CBD. But there are certain ingredients from that particular plant that is used now to prevent seizures, to help anxiety, and to help pain. And it all depends upon what ingredient. Oh, THC. Sorry, THC is the one that is the one that could be addictive. But there are several ingredients of THC. I mean, not necessarily the THC, but several varieties that is used for medicinal purposes. You can have it to as an anti-epileptic, anti-anxiety, So now, ang nangyari niyan, 20 years ago, I was against marijuana because I thought it would affect the human brain in terms of cognitive impairment. Pero over the years, I-realize ko pala na marami palang different ingredients, na different varieties. And if you have the right variety, they are non-addictive. They're used for medicinal purposes. And I could not tell you which one and what kind of ingredient is non-medicinal versus one is addictive.
Mhm. Okay.
No, uh, kunyari, no, isa kang drug surrendery.
Yes.
How would the Philippine, siyempre, sumurrender ka dahil hindi ka namang pusher, user ka. So, ano ang ginagawa po ng ating gobyerno sa Pilipinas kung kunyaring surrender ka na, surrender ka na, gusto mo magparehab? Is there like a agency na lalapitan sila na gusto nila ma-rehabilitate? May process pa ho doon? Ano po ho ba? Kasi under dito sa nakalagay po, no? Under the Comprehensive Dangerous Act of 2002, an individual found to be positive for use of any illegal drug should undergo a minimum of 6 months of rehabilitation in a treatment center. Ngayon po ba, yan pa rin ho ba ang ginagawa? Yan pa rin ho ba ang guidelines from the Dangerous Drugs Board kung updated po tayo?
I have to tell you that I've never been, it's been quite a while, I haven't been involved with the Department of Health. But that particular law will be impractical because if they require you to have 6 months rehabilitation, number one, who would foot the bill? Sino magbabayad sa kanilang treatment? Number two, ano mangyayari sila kung may trabaho sila? So they would be terminated kasi hindi silang papapakita. Tapos sasabihin mo sa employer, nahuli po ako dahil meron ako nakuha ng droga. Terminated ka. So it will add more problems. What I would suggest is this, is that first-time offenders, it should not be a criminal issue. They should be what they call registered. Meron meron tayong registry list na mga nahuli, nag-surrender. Tapos, ang mangyayari natin yan, i-connect natin sa barangay. So sa barangay natin, kasi barangay is our structure of our government, right? The barangay. So in that barangay, maybe we could have what they call, if we can be able to connect them to either a social worker, to a mental health worker, or to a doctor. For example, talagang malakas ang problema nila. They have delusions, they're paranoid, they're aggressive. So refer them to a psychiatrist because they need medications. Pero kung mga ordinary users, mga hindi naman masyado pang maluba, maybe they can go to a counselor. So maybe the barangay, ang barangay has pondo yan, may pondo yan. Alam ko, barangay has they have all the funds. Maybe they can set aside a certain amount of funds. Or maybe the PhilHealth. The PhilHealth can probably include in their services drug rehabilitation as outpatient, not inpatient. Ang outpatient, if you can have a registered social worker, mental health therapist, and you can have a list of people who is willing to treat them, they can be treated as an outpatient. Yung mga inpatient, yun yung mga talagang hardcore na mga drugs, yung mga talagang hindi they cannot stop because they're gonna go to withdrawal. Yun ang kailangan inpatient. But it only needs about 1 month, hindi kailangan 6 months.
Di ba may ilang level of ho ba to? Para may 5 levels ang drug user, di ba? Nakalagay lang po rito. Number 1, yung experimenter. Pangalawa po, yung social recreational user. Pangatlo po, habitual user. Pang-apat, drug abuser. At yung panglima po, yung drug dependent. Siguro yung mga 1, 2, and 3, yun po, yun. Pwede yan yung medyo mga mild pa lang po yan.
Yung mga yun, yung mga experimental, hindi siguro mangailangan ng treatment yun kasi they experimented and if they found it very unpleasant, they won't use it. Ang kailangan sa number 1 and 2 is education. Kaya nga importante education sa mga eskwela. Remember, I told you that from 6th grade until high school, to tell them the danger of these drugs. So that's number 1. Yung mga, and ang problema niyan, when does drug use becomes addiction? Ang mangyayari niyan, it becomes an addiction when the drug has reached a certain level sa brain that particular receptors na overload na ng itong meth, nangyayari na destroy na some of those brain cells. That gives you a sense of parang meron ka pang control, meron ka pang restraint sa mga behavior mo. So they cannot, and then when they stop the drug, they're gonna go to what they call crash. Para silang, they're gonna sleep a lot, they feel anxious, they feel depressed, they become irritable, agitated. So mangyayari niyan, they have to take another drug because they don't want to feel that way. So when you use drug to overcome that withdrawal of a drug, that's what you call addiction. When you develop withdrawals, when you develop tolerance, and tolerance means in order for you to feel the sense of the same pleasure you derived before at a certain dose, you have to increase the dose. Kunyari, before, ang ginawa mo lang met, isang droga lang. Tapos wala ka ng sense of pleasure sa isang droga, dadagdagan mo dalawa. Ang maya-maya, hindi na pwede, 5 naman. At some point, kahit gawin mo 10 ang kinuha mong tableta, hindi rin muubra, ang ibig sabihin nun, nasira ng mga brain cells mo, hindi na muubra. So that is where you really need inpatient treatment. Kasi ang mangyayari niyan, magiging impassive ka. You lose control. So you need to have a place wherein you cannot take drugs, you cannot get drugs. Where would that be? Sa inpatient rehab. Para hindi ka makalabas, bili ng gamot. Pero kung meron kang yung problema, wala ka sa inpatient, then you'll find a way to buy the drugs, to rob somebody, or to sell drugs.
So Doc, kung kunyari nga ho, talagang ano ka na, doon sa number 4 and 5 ka, which a drug abuser and drug dependent, wala ho bang programa ang ating gobyerno tungkol dyan sa pwede silang i-rehabilitate dali sa isang lugar? Kasi nababalita ho before na panahon nga ni Duterte na marami silang ginagawa mga rehab centers sa outskirts of Metro Manila. Maraming beds, siguro thousands of beds.
Totoo yan. Nangyari ganito yan. No? So I spoke one time doon sa parang parang merong a press conference wherein there were newspaper. Ang guest noon si General Elazar, yung Brigadier Elazar ngayon ng PNP. And there was a guest who was a assistant director sa Department of Health in Substance Abuse. And so they said that they have programs. Now, they have this bed dun sa Fort Magsaysay yata, 1,000 beds dinonated sa Chinese businessman. And there's another sa Nueva Ecija. Remember, merong isang 1,000 bed dun sa Nueva Ecija. Tapos meron pa 1,000 bed. Ang nangyari, hindi natuloy kasi ang nakalitira doon, wala pang 10. At that kaunti na nakatira doon. Number 1, walang staff. Kulang ang staff yun. Wala sila makuwang staff. Panueldo. Number 2, training. Number 3, natatakot siguro pumunta doon. Kasi once andurong ka, kasama mga police, mga sundalo, maybe they feel that they like a prisoner. So kailangan talaga dito, and drug rehab. Ang masama pa niyan, and the drug rehab we have right now are private drug rehabs. Ang nakakaya lang dyan may mayaman. Kasi ang pag pumunta ka sa mga drug rehab dyan, I believe ang 1 month sa drug rehab doon, umaabot ng 50,000 pesos o 30 to 50,000 pesos. Sino makakaya sa mga mahirap? Saan sila pagkuha ng pambayad? Kaya sabi ko nga lang, kung talaga tayong sincero sa droga, sa panglaban sa droga, dapat ang PhilHealth will allow people to have outpatient and inpatient. And number 2, will try to train a lot of mental health counselors. Yun pwedeng lagyan pondo. Ang gawin nila, bigyan ng scholarship sa mga estudyante sa college to learn mental health counseling. Tapos yung mga psychologists, ikalat sa ibang probinsya. Kasi ang problema, ang psychiatrist is 500 lang sa Pilipinas. Imagine 110 million and there are only 500 psychiatrists. That's about 1 to 200,000 people. Ang normal, ang healthy ratio ng psychiatrist sa mga tao dapat is 1 to 5 to 10,000. Nakita niyo na, 200,000, 5,000, 200,000, one psychiatrist per 200. Ang normal is 1 to 5,000. So, at saka karamihan ng psychiatrists nasa Greater Manila, walang sa probinsya. Tapos yung mga psychologists nasa Manila, walang sa probinsya. So we have to have incentives to send our psychiatrists, or the best thing is, since we lack psychiatrists, we should train the primary care physicians, yung mga general practitioners. Let's train them on how to detect drug addiction, how to treat it with medications, how to treat them with basic counseling. Kasi ang alam mong counseling dito sa drug addiction, it's not a magic. Hindi masyadong mahirap. All you have to do is to teach them what we call coping skills, meditation, communication skills, family involvement, social support systems. Tapos ituturo mo sila ng mga films about addiction. Then you will have group therapy in terms of how they have been affected. So there's nothing magical. There's nothing very, very difficult about a program. You only need the political will and the resources and the funds to address this issue.
Doc, nabanggit nyo kanina na ang heinous crimes na nagagawa ng isang drug addict is dahil sa kahirapan or poverty.
No, I didn't mean that. The heinous crime is not committed by poverty. Sa droga, kaya nakakaroon ng heinous crime because some of them have caused damage to the certain parts of the brain that makes you still think and act rationally. I'm talking about the prefrontal lobe, yung lobe ng brain. Tapos yung limbic system, na yun naman nagkocontrol ng mga anxiety mo, ng anger mo, nawalan ng control. So for you to have that problem, to commit heinous crimes, is that you have lost control about certain areas in the brain. And number two, that maybe the reason why there's heinous crimes in some people who have meth addiction is because they already have what they call pre-existing. Before they use drugs, they have already personality disorders, and tawag ng personality disorders. They call it antisocial. Hindi yung mahirap. Antisocial personality is one who have no remorse for doing things that are illegal. Kunyari yung mga taong walang konsyensya. Yung mga taong who take pleasure in inflicting pain on others. Who are those who violate authority. Yun ang mga taong mga antisocial.
So do you think sa sistema na nangyayari ngayon sa Pilipinas, meron pa ba mariresolve pa ba itong problema na ito?
Yes.
Sa nakikita niyo ano?
I think the first thing to do, which I cannot convince the president, is to end this drug war. End this drug war. And ituin na natin muna yan kasi he himself said, I have failed. Sinabi ni President Duterte, I failed. I don't know what to do. Give me anybody who can help me out. And I tried very hard to give them the solution, but it fell on deaf ears. Pinadala ko yun sa isang cabinet member, pinadala ko yun sa isang executive secretary, pinadala ko yun sa isang and I have to go to, and the senator, so my plan said, okay, you should talk to the senator, but nothing happened. So the only way I can really is for people to react, to say to themselves, this is not the answer. We need to ask the president, please, Mr. President, you're the father of the country. We are all your children. Whether we're drug addicts or drug addicts, ikaw pa rin ang tatay namin. Save us. We still have a life to live. We still have a future to live. So that's what we need to do. So end the drug war. Tapos number one, ang gawin niya, i-meet niya mga healthcare professionals, i-meet niya mga psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists. Ang pinakausapan ko lang sa mga psychiatrists, saka sociologists, why don't you take some action? Why don't you speak up? Made a comprehensive solution. Number three, yung mayayaman, yung mga bilyonaryo, ang dami-dami lang pera. Instead of investing in other countries, why they don't put up some kind of a foundation? Kamukha dito sa Pilipinas, Amerika. Bill Gates is giving so many billions. Warren Buffett, billions. Vaccination, to stop smallpox, to stop dengue, to stop this. If only these particular billionaires in the Philippines, if they're really sincere to help our Filipino people, why don't they invest in creating what they call foundation to help address the issue of depression, suicide, drug addiction, and also education? Bakit do we send them a lot yung mga eskwela, padala ng mga estudyante ng computers? Why don't we have much more broadband para lahat makapagamit ng computers?
Okay, I think we have two questions from our listeners and viewers. One is coming from Johnny Ongkapin. Sabi niya, Doc Jessy, are you in favor of legalizing the use of marijuana across the United States for recreational purposes?
Yung ako, the way I look at it, ang marijuana by itself, in the one that makes you high, I'm not in favor of it. But I'm in favor of using marijuana, certain ingredients in, I don't know which part is used for medicinal purposes, but I think it has special uses for chronic pain, for anxiety, for headaches. That I am in favor for. In terms of recreational use, I know it's approved now in Washington State and as well as in Colorado, and so people can buy it, and it's well. But I think that, you know what I think about marijuana, the way I look at it, it's not as, it is similar to taking alcohol. Di ba alcohol? It's now allowed to drink alcohol, but if you drink too much, you get DUI and you get arrested, right? But so long as you drink at home, you drink as much as you can drink, nobody's gonna arrest you. Just like marijuana. If you use marijuana for a certain amount, it will not make you intoxicated. It will not make you drunk. Yeah, I think if we can allow alcohol, if we can allow nicotine like cigarettes, it's also addictive. I'm just neutral about that case. I'm not for or against the recreation marijuana. I'm not against or for about it. I'm not gonna make it a crime.
Okay.
But I don't. But will I use it? I won't use it. I've never used drugs in my lifetime.
Okay. Another question from David C. Sabi niya, a lot of poor and homeless, paano ba to? A lot of poor and homeless that are so many that they can't, siguro that they, I don't know if he meant they can't help themselves. Sabi niya, then can the government prioritize drug abuse? Parang ganun, ano? I think that's the gist of his message.
I think the drug abuse is a minor issue. I think what we need to address is what we call the healthcare of our people. Kasi kung tutuusin, ang karamihan ng sakit natin ay dahil sa infection. Remember? Tuberculosis, madalas sa Pilipinas yan. In the Philippines, we have 60,000 deaths from pneumonia. In the Philippines, we have about 1,500 deaths from dengue. And we have poor sanitation. Toilet natin. Tingnan mo, pupunta ka sa mga shopping malls, tinatago yung mga toilet paper kasi ninanakaw daw. Pero how could they have good sanitation kung walang toilet paper sa kubeta? What about clean water? So if we can address that, we can leptospirosis. So if we have to address the healthcare system as best. We should have what we call, you know what happened to Taiwan? How were they able to control the COVID? They were able to control COVID. They have only 300 cases and 7 deaths. Ang kaya sila meron ganung na-control nila kasi they have what they call national health card. Everybody there has a national health card. Ibig sabihin nun, pag nagkasakit ka, identify nila kung sino nagkasakit. At libreng bayad dahil ang sakit mo. Because ang nangyari, universal health care. So if we have a national health care sa Pilipinas and fully publicly funded, it can address not only drug abuse, but also other diseases that kills us, like diabetes, heart disease, cancer,
Doc, dito sa America, does medical insurance cover the expenses for someone who wants to be rehabilitated? And more or less, how much would a person spend for rehabilitation? Let's say for 1 month or maybe 2 months or 3 months?
Alam mo, ang dito sa rehab sa America, for example, alcohol rehab or cocaine rehabilitation, ang pinakamura dito, $30,000. Tapos yung mga per month, for 28 days, 28-day treatment. 28-day madalas eh. Tapos yung mga expensive, kumaka dun sa mga Beverly Hills, yung mga parang may mga spa, may mga may mga ocean view, mga ganun, may mga masahe pa. Yun naman talagang para sa mga artista, umabot ng mga 50 to 100,000 for a 1-month treatment. Pero yung talagang traditional treatment, ang minimum treatment, 28 days, na average is about 30 to 40,000. Ang ngayon, cover insurance yun. Kasi karamihan insurance, kung maganda insurance mo, cover. Pero kunyari, let's say that you are in Obamacare. That I do not know whether, I think it be covered, but not that kind of expensive program. Maybe there is what you call outpatient program. Or maybe they have also inpatient, but not very expensive. Mangyayari niyan, whoever the facility is will have to accept whatever they would be paying. So it may be less.
So Doc, kung kunyari 28 days lang ang stay nila for that rehabilitation treatment, 28 days, is that sufficient enough?
Oh yes. You know what will happen? Kasi
28 days?
remember, 28 days. Kasi nga, ang mangyayari niyan, sa 28 days na yan, they will be in a inpatient facility. So they will have no access to buy drugs, right? So they're gonna go to withdrawal. So in those withdrawal, they will give them necessary medication, whether it be benzodiazepines, like for example, like Xanax or Valium to help them with their withdrawals, or they can give them something for sleep. And then about the next, it will take about several weeks for the withdrawal to stop, right? And then what will happen during that time, they will be involved in classes, like meditation, like stress management classes, communication skills, and then knowing themselves as a person. There will be cognitive therapy to look at their thought patterns. And then after that, 4 weeks, they're going to be going to what we call outpatient intensive treatment. Ang outpatient intensive treatment is about 3 days a week. Ang tawag doon, partial hospitalization, partial, means to say that they will be there 3 to 5 days a week for 6 hours.
After the 28 days. After the 28 days,
But
Doc.
maybe for a few months, siguro mga 1 month again, 2 months, and from there they're gonna be seen as an outpatient once a week with a therapist.
I see. May follow-up treatment
May follow-up.
after. Yeah.
May follow-up.
May mga group therapy, gano'n. May
Tama.
mga ganun-ganun
Therapy,
pa.
tama yun. Para they will follow what they call the 12 steps ng AA
Yeah,
meeting.
12 steps, yeah. Thank you, Doc.
Dr. Jessy, doon sa mga those people who have completed the rehab, is there still a possibility of relapse?
Oh yes, I mean, in the studies that being conducted, the number one drug that seems to have a highest incidence of relapse is alcohol. In alcohol, in 1 year's time, there are only 20% who remain sober. So alcohol is the number one. Okay, and the most dangerous drug that you need to worry about is heroin and fentanyl. And why is it very, very dangerous? Because it has the highest incidence of mortality. Ang problema sa heroin, it can cause you to have respiratory depression, which will cause you to have respiratory arrest, and then will lead to cardiac arrest. The fentanyl is also more potent than heroin, siguro mga 100 times. So fentanyl is more potent, and then that's why I'm very scared about fentanyl coming to the Philippines, because in America it's now the number one cause of death, and they're coming from China again.
Yeah.
Doc, may question po ako.
Sige.
You have been practicing medicine, di ba? Have you ever encountered prescribing your patient with this clozapine? Clozapine?
Yes.
Clozapine, I believe the most effective antipsychotic drug.
Yes. Ang clozapine is a drug that's very effective for treatment-resistant schizophrenia. Okay? And ang problema lang sa clozapine, you have to titrate the dose. At tapos ang side effect noon, it can cause you to have lowering of your white blood count. It can cause you to have loss of red blood cells, so anemia, and it can also cause you to have white blood cell to be diminished, so you're susceptible to infection. Ang magandang balita, yung clozapine na ngayon, yun ang last drug to be given to people who failed to other antipsychotics. But the good news is that psychiatry now is no longer just parang hula-hula, or kanya parang it's now a science. Psychiatry is now a science. And mental illness are all brain diseases, most of them. For example, we found schizophrenia has got to do with something wrong with part of the brain. Bipolar is also part of the brain that's affected. Depression, it's got to do with certain parts of the brain that has lost its brain cells. So ngayon, we believe that in depression, at some point of time when you are depressed, that's no longer got to do with because it's in your head, because you have a stress. It's a brain now being dysfunctional, that your depression still remains with you despite the fact that you overcome your stressful event. So right now, the psychiatry now is really a medical science. That's why we call it now neuropsychiatry.
Kaya pala may kaibigan ako, nabalitaan ko, Doc, bumalik siya sa doktor niya after having that brain surgery. Sabi niya, Doc, parang yung tahi ko, parang nakikita daw yung yung utak niya. Sabi naman, okay ba ho ito, Doc? Sabi ni Doc, okay yan. At least alam ng tao, open-minded ka.
Sabi ko na nga ba eh.
Sabi ko na nga ba, may punchline eh.
Anyway.
Naghihintay na lang ako.
Okay. Sino pa ba nandito, no? Merong isang dito, tiga Caloocan, si Bened. Sino ba ito? Ito yung binaliktad ng pangalan.
Yeah. Si kamag-anak ni yung lawyer.
Oh, okay.
Hindi pala lawyer, yung sheriff. Si Benedicto Manipis.
Yeah.
Diyan sa Caloocan, actually, very notorious yung area na yan. I think there's quite a number of drug users and drug pushers in that area. Yeah.
So, ayan. Dr. Ang, there are a lot of side effects ng mga drugs na mga drug users? What
Yeah,
are
crystal meth, yes. And ang pagka at some point yung crystal meth pagka naabuso na yan tapos ginamit madalas yan, it could make you paranoid. You think that people are out to get you,
Yeah.
suspicious. You could have hallucinations. You could be aggressive. You could be depressed. You could be suicidal. So, ang akin lang pinakausapan, let's work as a people. I'm not saying that there are police officers who are living to their duties, but I think I'm only pleading to our president that it's time now to see this as a medical issue and put our efforts that we as a people, from the law enforcement to the citizens, let's work together to address other issues that's important in terms of addressing the issues of poverty, the issues of education, the issues of healthcare, the issues about the COVID-19. How can we survive this particular pandemic? So the best way is to work together, not against each other, but find a common ground. But the only way we can have a common ground is that it has to be based upon justice, based upon the most important is compassion, mercy, compassion. Yan naman, sabi ko sa iyo, I believe that the true measure of a nation is based upon how it treats its disabled, its poor, its neglected, and no voice to speak up.
Saludo po kami sa advocacy niya talaga, Doc. Ano ba kayo, Doc? US citizen or dual citizenship?
I have both.
You have both?
Yes, I have both.
Sayang. Kung pwede ho kayong kumandidato, boboto ko ho kayo.
Ay, hindi naman ako kandidato. I'm gonna...
Kailangan natin ng ano eh. Maganda
all I can tell you, ganito yan. Sasabihin ko lang sa inyo ang aking pangarap. I still have a vision. Kasi nga, mula pa nung estudyante ko sa medicine student, I was advocating for reforms. So I was then the student council president of 1971. Ang kasama ko na si Edgar Hobson. Si Edgar Hobson was the leader of the National Union of Students of the Philippines. And he was an advocate for democracy. And when I saw him, I thought he would be a president of the Philippines because he had the character, he had integrity, he was articulate. But then he was killed because unfortunately he was disillusioned and then joined the Communist Party of the Philippines, became Secretary General, and when martial law was declared, he was killed. And then along with Ninoy Aquino, there were martyrs. Pero ang aking lungkot lang na we thought that the EDSA revolution would lead into a real revolution of heart. That there will be yung mga lupa bibigay sa mga farmers, yung mga sugar workers will be given chance to own land. Eh kaso hindi naman nangyari yun. Tapos ang nangyari nito from sabi nga ng mga iba, there were elitist liberals and now it's populist programs. But let's stop this slogan and let's figure out how we can really give a true democracy. Kaya sabi ko naman, ang aking lang advocacy doon is to help our country. So advocate for social
Wala
reform.
yata, no?
What was this again?
I think we lost your signal for a few seconds.
Oh,
No,
advocate,
it's okay.
advocate for
It's okay.
advocate for healthcare reforms, advocate for social reforms. Pero I will do my very best as a kasi mahal kong bayan natin. Kaya nandito ako sa Amerika, ang aking puso pa rin ay nasa Pilipinas. I feel that somehow and I'm thankful to America because kumbaga nangyari dito, if you do sinabi ko nga the four measures of the four ingredients of success is education, sipag o initiative, opportunity, at saka gantimpala. So even I was able to graduate medicine. When I came here, they gave me a lot of jobs. I worked many hours per day, even including weekends. And then I became medical director. Then I owned a medical business, and then finally I made it. And now that I am already in my now retired, semi-retired, I wanted to see what I can help the Philippines. So what I'm thinking about doing is advocating for what they call better treatment for mentally ill in terms of maybe public health, maybe public radio, TV radio, weekly basis, talk about psychosocial issues. Number two, create more outpatient clinics for mental illness, educate the doctors about how to treat mental illness. Kasi hindi na kaya na sa KAIS ko, konti lang sila eh. And then in terms of political reforms, I would like to see whether we could the poor and the rich can be able to say we are part of the solution. So the poor should ask themselves, should we stop being entitled? We should find a ways how could we get educated so that we can have some dignity and be proud of ourselves. And the rich they should ask themselves, what are you going to do with your billions of pesos? You'd want to outsmart somebody that I have more money than you do, and then you invest your property in other countries. Why don't you do something about helping your own fellow Filipinos? You live here, so let's find a way how we can work it out, you know.
Mga sinasabi nyo, Doc, talagang naniniwala ako sa Pilipinas. Marami tayong talagang nagkaroon ng brain drain.
Oh,
Marami, isa na ho kayo, pati mga naging ibang guest natin dito. Brain drain po tayo. Ngayon, ang nangyayari po, you want to give back. Di ba ho?
Sinabi ko nga kay
Pabalik na ho ng Pilipinas.
When I supported Aquino when they ran for president. When he ran for president, I advocated to Secretary Imelda Nicolas that they should create what they call a national corps of volunteers. Yun ang proposal ko that the people who are doctors, engineers, architects who are coming from like the United States will come and stay there in the Philippines, offer their services for free, but they will be given housing, and not very expensive housing, but just adequate housing, transportation, and then tax for whatever they want, tax free. And that was one thing that I advocated. And the other one I advocated was in terms of that the one thing I advocated for the government was to consider scholarships for free for what we call needed courses as an architect, such as lawyers, such as doctors, nurses. Bayaran ng gobyerno man na yan, tapos parang panatapos naman sila, they will be committed to serve for 2-3 years. May sweldo sila, ha? And then, because then we will have a lot of architects to build our buildings, our low-income housing, doctors, nurses, mga engineers. So, alam mo yan, I think it's just a matter of just being creative and being what you call, we need to have what you call commitment. Kaya nga sabi ko nga sa inyo na the Filipinos, there's a lot of potential. Marami tayong magagaling tao rin eh. We have a lot of great singers. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. What we just need is something like how could we be able to utilize or tap all these resources? What we did is just, ang sinasabi ko lagi, let us not wait for another Messiah or another leader to save us. We've always been disillusioned. We've always been failed by those leaders. What we need to believe is that every one of us, has a capacity to be a leader. And if we have the same kind of ideals, that we are in this together and we share the same kind of vision, that one day Filipinos and our Filipino nation will be a true, just, democratic, and progressive country, and we all contribute, rich and poor, and find a way that instead of A class to F class, that there is no A nor F, that we are all, in one sense, have some sense of dignity and respect for each other.
Okay, at alam ko si Dr. Jessy can share a lot of things, of different topics, but we're trying to work out something, maybe a part 2, a part 3, or a part 4, series, because I heard him talk about COVID-19, which is very interesting also. So let's give time muna kay Dr. Jessy to maybe arrange a sequence kung anong mga magagandang topic that our listeners and our viewers would really benefit from. Okay. So,
Salamat ako kay Rico. Tony. kay Fred, kay Wesley, right?
Wesley.
And yes. Ed for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I'm glad to be able to be part of the show. And I thought that this may be one way of trying to use as a medium to what you call to share my knowledge and my services. And what I would like to do is that in the future, if you want to use me, is to talk about the topic that I discussed before in terms of how to finding mental wellness in a pandemic, coping with COVID-19. That will be one topic that I could talk about, which is very relevant and needed right now. Number 2 is I know there is a hidden epidemic of depression and suicide because I hear stories about people who committed suicide from people who are wealthy. I mean, how could you imagine sa kanilang yaman, ba't nakapakamatay ito? O yung mahirap, nakapakamatay din to. And people, I heard stories, daughters and sons of senators and politicians and businessmen and teachers and ordinary people. what makes people commit suicide? Is it something that it's not something unique on the Philippines, but it is all over the world, from Japan to China to United States. So what causes people to commit suicide, and how can they prevent suicide, and what is the role of faith in helping someone deal with depression? So I could talk about that topic.
Okay, so we will expect more from you, Dr. Jessy Ang.
Thank you.
So, okay, I think medyo kailangan na natin pagpahingahin si Dr. Jessy Ang. Medyo siguro exhausted si Dr. Jessy Ang nito pagkatapos ito ating program. But I think, Dr. Jessy, you gave us a lot of information, and I'm sure that all our listeners and viewers benefited from all the things that you mentioned. And of course, no, we'll pray and maybe hearing your advocacy, some people in the Philippines, might be able to help, and hindi natin alam kung hanggang saan makakaabot yan, but hopefully, and we pray that the sound advices and approaches that you mentioned are really worth considering. Okay, so paalam na muna tayo. Una tayo kay Ed.
Okay, maraming salamat. Thank you to Dr. Jessy. I just want to let you know that I am totally in agreement with you in your aspirations for a better Philippines.
Thank you.
Wesley?
Sa lahat ng viewers, kalat natin to kasi ang ganda ng advocacy ni Doc. Baka sakali na makarating sa tamang tao kung paano makakatulong sa ating bansa. At kay Doc naman, kung pwede lang kitang i-multiply ng 1,000 or million times, I will do that. I will do that. Thank you, Doc. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley. Thank you very much for your kind compliments.
Freddy?
Maraming salamat sa ating mga tagapakinig ulit. Lumampas na naman po kami ng 1 oras as usual. At Doc, ang dami ko pong na-pick up at napakaganda ng inyong advocacy. Totoo lang po na talaga it's coming from my, sana nga ho, tama ho yung sinabi ni Kuya Wesley. Kailangan namin ng maraming ganyan, lalo na sa ating, sa mahal nating Pilipinas.
Mahanyo ako sa next year, pupunta ko doon.
Sige ho. Hindi pa ho tayo huli. Hindi pa ho huli lahat, do. And I'm hoping the program tonight would have a part 2. Especially nga sa sinabi ni Tony, doon naman sa topic of COVID concerning yung, ayun na nga, yung psychiatric, talagang marami hong ganyan ngayon. So maybe next time po natin mapapag-usapan yan.
Let me know when. I will be.
Marami pong salamat. Tony, Ed, Wesley, thank you. Listeners, good night. Till next
Good night.
time.
Okay.
Doc, thank you.
I'll give you the last say, Dr. Jessy Ang, maybe some inspiring words for the listeners and the viewers of Radio Filipino.
Marami niya ako nasabi, pero nagpapasalamat uli ako kay Tony, kay Fred, kay Wesley, at kay Ed for hosting this particular show. I hope that we can have more of this, and we can have a dialogue where we can help one another, because we can learn from each other. We can learn from each other how to address this issue. So in the spirit of camaraderie, in the spirit of brotherhood, in the spirit of as a people, let's work together. So that's my parting word. And with the help of God and with the help of ourselves, I hope we can find a reality that that our nation become again a true democratic, free and compassionate nation. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Jessy Ang. At kami nagpapasalamat sa lahat ng mga listeners at viewers natin. At kami babalik next week, Monday. At have a nice weekend and a safe one. Magandang gabi.
Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay po kayo. Sige po. Paalam.
Tony. Kung yun ang kapatanong, may mga tanong ko tayo. Okay, ang more questions. I'll try to answer them now.